National parks and the wilderness, in general, have long been a magnet for strange disappearances. On April 5th, 2017, 22-year-old Jacob Gray left his home in Port Townsend, Washington, to go on a bike ride. It was a sturdy bike, and behind him he towed a trailer full of all sorts of camping gear he would need for his journey, which was to be a cross country trip from Washington to Vermont, where his brother lived there with the US Coast Guard. Unfortunately, he would never arrive and thus would mark the beginning of a strange unsolved mystery surrounded by bizarre clues. Before we head into today's story, if you are new to our channel, please consider hitting that red subscribe button and turn on all the notifications so that you will never miss any of our weekly uploads. It began when a woman came across the bike and trailer stopped along the Salt Duke Hot Springs Road in Olympic National Park, somewhat off the road but still visible by anyone passing by. And she immediately recognized it because she had seen a young man riding it only 2 hours before. She did not see any sign of anyone there and mentioned it to the rangers in that area. The bike stayed there the whole day, and when rangers checked the following morning to find it still there, untouched, it was seen as a bit odd. Rangers decided to investigate and found that the bike had belonged to Jacob Gray based on the list of phone numbers in his notebook. The trailer with all of its gear seemed to have been abandoned with no sign of Jacob. Yet, there were signs that he had tried to set up a camp. There was a tarp laid out on the ground and miscellaneous camping equipment laid out. But Jacob seems to have suddenly left the area before it could all be fully set up. There was a weird little detail in that 4 arrows had been stuck into the ground in an east-west line, but no one could figure out why he would have wanted to do that or what it signified. A look at the bike showed it to be still totally functional, with no flat tires for any reason why Jacob couldn't have continued along. So where had he gone? No one had a clue. Quick search of the area showed no trace of where Jacob could have gone. There was no sign of struggle or animal attack. There was nothing strange found in the nearby river. Oddly, none of his gear had been brought with him, so authorities were beginning to think he had perhaps wandered off to go exploring and had gotten lost. But why do that in the middle of setting up a camp? And why had those arrows been eerily stuck into the ground? Things would get weirder when Jacob's family was contacted, and it turned out that he had told no one of his plans. The only one who had known about it was Jacob's brother, Micah. Another oddity was that Micah said that Jacob had planned to visit him in Vermont, yet the abandoned bike and trailer had been found at Daniel Evans Wilderness, which was actually to the west of where he had been heading. He had no reason to visit the park and had not told his brother about the detour, so it was seen as a very strange. A larger search effort was launched, using tracker dogs and dozens of volunteers and search and rescue personnel, although it did not get underway until several days after Jacob had been missing. On April 12th, there were found tracks that suggested that the missing man had at some point switched from hiking boots to running shoes for some reason, and there were also found signs that someone may have fallen into the river in the form of scuff mark on a mossy rock as well as signs that someone may have tried to exit the water further downstreams. Jacob's father, Randy, even personally put on a wetsuit to go diving to search the bottom, but there was nobody there. On April 15th, there would be another promising clue when a pair of shorts were found a few miles downstream. But it was unknown if these had even belonged to the Jacob or why they should have been removed in the first place. At this point, the main theory was that Jacob had accidentally slipped and fallen into the river. But with no body, no one could be sure. As this was going on, there were flyers distributed throughout the region, but these turned up no hits. And when there was no further signs of Jacob, the search was scaled back and dried up almost entirely. With only the Jacobs family tirelessly searching on their own, but they never found anything. Another official search would not be carried out until 2017, which also turned up nothing. It was as if Jacob had evaporated into thin air. It would not be until August of 2018 that any new clues would be found, and it was not the outcome anyone would have hoped for. On August 10th, 2018, some Olympic National Park employees found some abandoned camping equipment, a wallet, and skeletal human remains at Hole Lake. Later that day, a discovery would be made when some biologists who were in the area studying across a treeless ridge above the lake and 5,300 feet above the sea level that would soon be identified as those of missing Jacob Gray. This discovery would answer the question of Jacob's ultimate fate, but it also left many new unanswered questions. One was that the body was found 15 miles from the abandoned bike, well off the nearest trail and at a much higher altitude through rugged terrain. And what's more, at the time of the disappearance, it would have been well within the snow line and covered with snow. Why would he have wanted to venture there? Also, strange is that the remains were found with plenty of food and were dressed warmly. So how had he died? The Clallam County coroners would not be able to find a clear cause of death, ultimately deeming the cause to be inconclusive. There are numerous oddities surrounding this case. Why didn't he tell anyone where he was going? And why did he head west instead of east as he planned? Why was he in the Daniel Evans Wilderness in Olympic National Park? Why would he have wandered off the trail in the first place to make his way up to that lonely, treeless ridge? Why change his shoes to sneakers? And how exactly did he die? What was with the slow response with search efforts? These are the questions we have no answers for at the moment, and it remains a spooky mystery. Please let me know in the comments box what do you think about today's episode. Also, if you didn't subscribe to our channel, please consider to hit that red button below and subscribe to our channel. Till then, take care.